My family disowned me after my girlfriend accused me of struggle snuggling her. My own mother told me I was dead to her. My name is Ethan Mitchell, and 3 years ago, I was a 25-year-old software developer living in Boston with what I thought was a perfect life. I had a steady job at a promising tech startup, a comfortable apartment in Cambridge, and a girlfriend named Megan who I'd been dating for just over 2 years. We had talked about marriage. I had even started saving for a ring. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday in October. I came home early from work with takeout Thai food, Megan's favorite, planning to surprise her. Instead, I was the one surprised when I heard strange noises coming from our bedroom. I stood frozen in the hallway, our dinner growing cold in my hands, as the awful truth dawned on me. When I pushed open the door, I found Megan with Kevin, a marketing guy from my office. "This isn't what it looks like," Megan stammered as Kevin grabbed his clothes and rushed past me. But it was exactly what it looked like, and we both knew it. That night, after hours of painful conversation where Megan admitted the affair had been going on for months, I told her I needed space. I called my parents to ask if I could stay with them for a few days. They agreed, concerned but supportive. I packed a small bag and went to sleep on their couch, emotionally exhausted but grateful for their presence. I woke up to 3 police officers at the door. Megan had called them in the middle of the night, claiming I had sexually assaulted her before leaving the apartment. My father went pale as the officers explained why they were there. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. I was taken in for questioning, completely blindsided and terrified. I would never hurt her. I kept repeating to the detective, "She's lying because I caught her cheating." After 6 hours of interrogation, they released me due to lack of evidence. But by then, the damage was done. When I returned to my parents' house, my mother was waiting with my hastily repacked bag at the door. "I didn't raise a monster," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I want you out of this house. Now." "Mom, please," I begged, my voice breaking. They released me. "There's no evidence. She's lying." "Where there's smoke, there's fire," my father added from behind her. "We can't have you here." I stood on their porch in the rain, watching as they closed the door in my face. Within minutes, my mother had blocked my number. My father sent a single text, "Don't contact us again until you get help." That same evening, my university email pinged with a notice of immediate suspension pending investigation. By morning, friends I'd had for years were sending messages telling me they couldn't associate with someone like me. My LinkedIn connections dropped by dozens as word spread through my professional network. My entire life had imploded in less than 24 hours based on a lie told by someone I had loved deeply. 3 days later, standing on the edge of Boston Harbor Bridge, I looked down at the dark water below and wondered if anyone would even miss me. It was my childhood friend Sam who found me there, somehow knowing where I'd go. He pulled me back literally and figuratively from the brink. "You're not ending your story like this," he said firmly, gripping my shoulders. "Not because of her. Not because of any of them." Right when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, Sam became my lifeline. He didn't just pull me back from that bridge, he offered me a way out. "Boston isn't the only city in America," he said, guiding me to his car like I might shatter at any moment. "You need to start fresh somewhere. People don't know Megan's lies." That night, Sam let me crash on his couch while we hatched a plan. He emptied his savings account $1,200 he'd been saving for a gaming PC and handed it to me without hesitation. "Consider it an investment in your future," he insisted when I tried to refuse. By dawn, I was on a Greyhound bus headed for Portland, Oregon, as far from Boston as I could afford to go. The journey was a 72-hour blur of rest stops, gas station coffee, and silent tears as I watched the familiar New England landscape give way to places I'd never seen. I arrived in Portland with $800 left, no job prospects, and nowhere to stay. The first night, I slept in a homeless shelter where someone stole my laptop, the final piece of my old life gone just like that. For 3 weeks, I rotated between different shelters, showering at a community center and applying for any job that didn't require references. I finally landed work washing dishes at a diner for minimum wage, working from 5 p.m. until 3 a.m. 6 nights a week. The manager paid me in cash, no questions asked. After a month of saving every penny, I could afford to rent a room in a house with 4 other guys, a former garage with no windows and barely enough space for a mattress on the floor. "This is temporary," became my daily mantra as I scrubbed pots until my hands cracked and bled. The lowest point came when I developed a raging tooth infection but couldn't afford a dentist. I worked 3 shifts with my face swollen to twice its normal size before a cook noticed me crying in the storage room and gave me antibiotics his dog hadn't needed. I've never felt more grateful for anything in my life. With 6 months of dishwashing under my belt, I found slightly better work at a construction site. The physical labor was punishing, but it paid $15 in Harena to enroll in night classes at the community college. I chose education courses, hoping to eventually become a teacher, something as far removed from my former tech career as possible. During this time, I legally changed my name from Ethan Mitchell to Daniel Walker. The day I signed the paperwork, I sat in a public park and sobbed for hours. It felt like erasing the last 25 years of my life, like admitting that Ethan was truly dead, killed not by the bridge I'd contemplated jumping from, but by Megan's lies and my family's betrayal. Despite working 60-hour weeks and taking classes, I was drowning in student loan debt from my former life. When bill collectors tracked me down, I took on weekend work as a security guard, sleeping just 3 to 4 hours a night for months. I lived on ramen noodles and free day-old bread from a bakery near the construction site. 2 years after arriving in Portland, with my teaching degree nearly complete, I had my first job interview at an elementary school. When the principal asked about the gap in my employment history, I had a full-blown panic attack right there in her office. Somehow, this became the unlikely turning point in my journey. As she helped me breathe through it, I made a split-second decision to tell her the truth, all of it. "I don't know if I can hire someone with your background," she admitted when I finished, "but I know someone in Denver who might." That single act of kindness from the Portland principal changed everything. 3 weeks later, I was driving a used Honda Civic I'd bought for $2,000 across state lines to Denver, Colorado. My teaching degree wasn't quite finished, but Westridge Elementary had offered me a position as a teacher's aide with the promise of a full teaching role once I completed my certification. Denver felt different from the moment I arrived. The mountain air seemed cleaner somehow, like it could wash away the past 3 years of my life. My tiny studio apartment might have been a closet by normal standards, but to me, it was a palace, the first place that was truly mine since leaving Boston. For the first time since Megan's accusation, I allowed myself to feel something dangerous: hope. My first day at Westridge Elementary was terrifying. Each time a female teacher approached me, I would instinctively back away or flinch if they came too close. I avoided being alone with any woman, including the sweet 60-year-old librarian who just wanted to show me where they kept the extra supplies. The school counselor noticed my behavior and gently suggested I might benefit from therapy. With my employee health insurance, I could finally afford it. 6 months of weekly sessions helped me understand that the trauma I'd experienced had rewired my brain to perceive danger everywhere. I wasn't healing, but I was functioning, showing up to work, paying my bills, even occasionally smiling at coworkers. I finally completed my teaching degree and was given my own third-grade classroom the following fall. It was at a regional teachers conference that winter that I met Rebecca. She was presenting a workshop on trauma-informed teaching practices, and something about her gentle approach and obvious passion for helping kids overcome difficult backgrounds resonated with me. After her presentation, I awkwardly approached her with questions about implementing her strategies. "Would you like to discuss this over coffee?" she asked, and for the first time in years, I said yes to something that scared me. Our first date was a disaster by any normal standard. When Rebecca reached across the table to touch my hand, I jerked away so violently I knocked over my water glass. Instead of being offended, she simply asked, "Someone hurt you badly, didn't they?" The understanding in her eyes broke something loose inside me, and I found myself telling her everything: my real name, Megan's accusation, my family's rejection, the years of struggling to survive. I expected her to politely excuse herself and never contact me again. Instead, she reached toward me again, this time moving deliberately slowly, telegraphing her intentions until her hand rested lightly on mine. "Thank you for trusting me with your story, Daniel," she said. "Or Ethan, whichever you prefer." Rebecca's patience over the following months was nothing short of miraculous. She never pushed for physical intimacy, always asking permission before touching me, gradually helping me relearn that human contact didn't have to mean betrayal or pain. Our relationship progressed with excruciating slowness by conventional standards, but for me, each small step was monumental. 1 year after our first date, I met Rebecca's parents, Martha and William, who welcomed me into their home without judgment or suspicion. Watching them interact, the casual affection, the inside jokes, the unconditional support, I was reminded of what a healthy family looked like. It made the absence of my own family both more painful and somehow less important. By the time I proposed to Rebecca 2 years later, I was beginning to believe I might actually have a future worth living. When we learned she was pregnant just 6 months after our small wedding ceremony, I was terrified of failing as a father. The day our twins, Emma and Nathan, were born was the first time I truly felt the man I used to be, Ethan Mitchell from Boston, might finally be at peace. For 5 beautiful years, we built a life filled with Christmas mornings, bedtime stories, and weekend trips to the mountains. I had almost convinced myself the past would stay buried forever. Just when I thought I had finally outrun my past, it found me on an ordinary Tuesday evening. The twins had just turned 4, and Nathan was sitting on my lap as we played his favorite racing game on the PlayStation. Rebecca and Emma were in the backyard, planting sunflower seeds in the small garden we'd started that spring. The sound of their laughter drifted through the open windows, mixing with the electronic noises from the game, a perfect moment of domestic peace that I had once thought impossible for someone like me. Then came the knock at the door. "I'll get it, buddy," I told Nathan, pausing the game and setting him aside. "Probably just the package Mom ordered." I opened the door without checking the peephole, a casual gesture that showed how comfortable I'd become in my new life. How safe I felt in this home we'd created. The face staring back at me belonged to another lifetime. My father, Robert Mitchell, stood on my porch with more gray in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes, but unmistakably the man who had turned his back on me 7 years earlier. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The blood roared in my ears as the carefully constructed walls between Daniel Walker and Ethan Mitchell came crashing down. "Son," he said simply, his voice cracking on that single syllable. I slammed the door with such force that the windows rattled. Behind me, Nathan let out a frightened whimper. The sound of my child's fear broke through my panic long enough for me to turn and force a smile. "Everything's okay, buddy. Let's go find Mommy, all right?" I scooped him up, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped him, and carried him to the backyard. Rebecca took one look at my face and immediately stood, brushing soil from her gardening gloves. "Daniel? What's wrong? You're white as a ghost." The pounding on the front door resumed, more insistent now. "Take the kids to their room," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant and unfamiliar even to my own ears. "Please, just keep them there." Rebecca gathered both children and hurried them inside through the back door as I stood frozen in our garden, trying to remember how to breathe. The knocking continued, a relentless reminder that my carefully constructed life was paper-thin, vulnerable to being torn apart by a single visitor from the past. I found myself sitting on the garden bench, hyperventilating, when Rebecca returned. She knelt in front of me, taking my hands in hers. "Talk to me, Daniel. Who's at the door?" "My father," I whispered, the words burning like acid in my throat. "From Boston. He found me." Rebecca's expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. Without another word, she stood and marched toward the front of the house. I followed in a daze, reaching the living room just as she threw open the front door to confront the man who had abandoned me when I needed him most. "Who are you?" she demanded, her normally gentle voice sharp with protective fury. "I'm Robert Mitchell, Ethan's father," he replied, his eyes moving past her to find me standing in the shadowed hallway. "Please, I need to speak with my son." "Your son?" Rebecca's laugh was cold and cutting. "You mean the son you threw out in the rain when he needed you? The son who had to change his name and move across the country because his own family believed a lie? That son?" My father seemed to physically shrink under her words. "Please," he said again, his voice barely audible. "I know what we did was unforgivable, but I have information, evidence, about Megan." I stepped forward then, drawn by a mixture of dread and desperate curiosity. Rebecca turned to me, her eyes softening. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "Say the word, and I'll make him leave." For a long moment, I considered it telling this ghost from my past to disappear forever. But some small, wounded part of me needed to know why he was here after all this time. "It's okay," I told Rebecca, though nothing about this situation felt remotely okay. "Can you check on the kids? I'll talk to him." As Rebecca reluctantly left us alone, I stared at the stranger who shared my blood. "You have 5 minutes," I told him, not inviting him further into my home. "Start talking." My father pulled out his phone with trembling hands and held it toward me. 3 weeks ago, Megan asked me to help clear space on her phone, he explained. While I was going through her old messages, I found these conversations from 7 years ago, between her and the man you caught her with. On the screen was a text exchange that made my knees buckle. Megan, I can't live with what I did to him. The police investigation is closed, but his life is still ruined. Kevin, you need to tell the truth. Megan, I can't. His parents would never forgive me. No one would. After 7 years of pain, exile, and rebuilding from nothing, the proof of my innocence had been sitting in my ex-girlfriend's phone all along. The evidence of my innocence should have felt like vindication. Instead, it left me hollow, a delayed justice that came years too late to save me from the wreckage Megan's lie had made of my life. I sent my father away that night without a definitive answer about reconciliation. I needed time to process, to think clearly without the shock of his sudden appearance clouding my judgment. 2 days later, after Rebecca had taken emergency leave from work to help with the twins while I struggled through waves of renewed trauma, I arranged to meet my father at his hotel's coffee shop. Walking into that sterile lobby felt like crossing a border between my present and past lives. Daniel Walker meeting with a ghost from Ethan Mitchell's history. I wasn't sure you'd come, my father said, rising as I approached his table. He looked older in the harsh fluorescent lighting, more fragile than the towering figure who had once defined my understanding of fatherhood. I almost didn't, I replied truthfully, taking the seat across from him but leaving my jacket on, a subtle sign I wouldn't be staying long. I need to understand exactly what happened with Megan and why you're here now. My father's hands trembled slightly as he pulled out his phone again, showing me more screenshots of conversations between Megan and Kevin. The full picture was even worse than I'd imagined. Megan had maintained relationships with my parents for years after my disappearance, playing the role of the traumatized victim while secretly carrying the guilt of her lie. She had been to holiday dinners, birthdays, even accompanied my mother to doctor's appointments, all while knowing she had destroyed their son's life. We finally cut her off completely after I found these messages. My father explained, his voice thick with self-disgust. Your mother was. She didn't take it well. She wanted to contact you immediately, but I thought it would be better if I came alone first. Something in his phrasing caught my attention. How did you even find me? I changed my name, moved across the country. I don't have social media. My father looked down at his coffee. We hired a private investigator last year. Not to intrude on your life, but just to know you were okay. When we learned you were married with children, we decided not to reach out unless you contacted us first. Then when I found Megan's messages, he trailed off, shrugging helplessly. The thought of being watched, of strangers documenting my new life to report back to the people who had cast me aside, made me physically ill. So you've been spying on me? On my family? It wasn't like that. He insisted. We just needed to know you were alive. After you disappeared, the police thought you might have. He couldn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he meant. They thought I had jumped from that bridge after all. Well, as you can see, I survived. I said coldly, no thanks to any of you. The conversation lasted another hour, with my father alternating between apologies and attempts to explain the inexplicable how parents could abandon their child based solely on an accusation. He told me my brother Jason had tried hundreds of times to contact me in those early months, sending money to addresses where I'd already moved on from, calling a phone I'd long since disconnected. Your mother blocked all your contacts on the family phone plan, he explained, a detail that explained why I'd never received Jason's supposed attempts to help. She wasn't thinking clearly. None of us were. When I finally left the hotel, I carried with me the devastating knowledge that had my brother's messages reached me, my years of homelessness and struggle might have been avoided. That my mother, even while believing the worst of me, had deliberately severed the one lifeline that might have saved me from the darkest years of my life. Back home, I found Rebecca waiting up for me in the living room, a cup of tea cooling on the coffee table beside her. How was it? She asked simply. I collapsed beside her, emotionally drained. Confusing. Infuriating. Megan was part of their lives all this time, Rebecca. Family dinners, holidays. While I was sleeping in shelters and working my hands raw just to survive. Rebecca held me as I finally allowed myself to cry out the desperate tears of a man whose life had been destroyed. But the complex grief of someone confronting a wound that had scarred over badly, only to be reopened years later. The twins asked about the sad man at the door. She said quietly when my tears had subsided. They want to know who he is. The innocent question sparked something resolute within me. After days of internal debate and another sleepless night, I made my decision. I would return to Boston one last time, and not to reconcile, but to confront everyone who had played a part in destroying my life. I needed to look them in the eyes, to speak my truth, and finally close a chapter that had remained painfully unfinished for 7 years. I need to do this alone, I told Rebecca as I booked my flight. I need to end this on my terms. The moment my plane touched down in Boston, I felt like an imposter in my own skin. After 7 years as Daniel Walker, I was returning to the city where Ethan Mitchell had been destroyed. The familiar skyline through the taxi window seemed to belong to a movie I'd watched long ago rather than a place I'd once called home. I walked into my parents' house with one purpose, not reconciliation, but truth. In the living room waited my mother, brother Jason, and most surprisingly, Megan. My mother broke into tears and moved toward me, but I stepped back. "I'm not here for a reunion," I said coldly. "I'm here for the truth, all of it, and then I'm going back to my real family." I demanded answers about why they had abandoned me so easily. My mother's excuses about being overwhelmed rang hollow. The only revelation that pierced my armor was learning that Jason had truly tried to reach me hundreds of times, attempts my mother had deliberately blocked while telling him I wanted nothing to do with the family. When Megan began her rehearsed speech about therapy and undying love, I cut her off. "Don't lie about not moving on. I know there were others after me." Her face flushed as my father confirmed her messages had revealed multiple relationships, destroying her narrative of perpetual grief. Looking at these people who had once been my entire world, I felt something unexpected. Pity. I pulled out my phone and showed them photos of my family, Rebecca, Emma, and Nathan. "This is what your lies cost, all of us," I said firmly. "These are the grandchildren you'll never know, the daughter-in-law you'll never meet, the life I built from the ashes of what you destroyed." As I turned to leave, Jason followed me to the door. "Can I at least keep in touch?" he asked, his voice breaking. "I want to know my niece and nephew someday." I paused, looking at my younger brother, the only one who had tried to help me. "I'll think about it," I said finally, the closest thing to hope I could offer. My last stop in Boston was at Sam's house, where my oldest friend welcomed me warmly and introduced me to his family. It was the only part of my visit that felt healing rather than reopening old wounds. Flying back to Denver the next day, I felt lighter somehow. Not because I had forgiven or forgotten, but because I had faced my past on my terms. As the plane touched down, I texted Rebecca, "Coming home now, to my real family." When I walked through our door and heard Nathan and Emma shouting, "Daddy's home," as they raced toward me, I knew with absolute certainty that the life I had built from nothing was worth infinitely more than what I had lost. The family I had chosen and who had chosen me despite knowing my broken parts was my true legacy. Some lessons are learned through unimaginable pain. True family is defined by actions, not blood. And sometimes, the greatest revenge against those who try to destroy you is to build something beautiful from the ruins they left behind. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button to help others find it. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And subscribe to join our community of resilient souls who've learned that sometimes being underestimated is your greatest superpower. Together, we're writing new endings to old stories, and I can't wait to share the next chapter with you.